Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parirajaka Acharya Ashtatara Shata Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parirajaka Acharya Ashtatara Shata Shri Srimad. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srila Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Mathura Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Gangamai Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 17. Text 16. Narayana Paro Yogo Narayana Param Tapaha Narayana Param Jnanam Narayana Para Gatihi Narayana Paro Yogo Narayana Param Tapaha Narayana Param Jnanam Narayana Paragatihi Narayana Paro Yogo Narayana Param Tapa Narayana Param Jnanam Narayana Paragatihi Narayana Paro Yogo Narayana Param Tapaha Narayana Param Jnanam Narayana Paragatihi
Narayana Paro Yogo
Narayana Paro Yogo
Narayana Param Tapaha
Narayana Param Tapaha
Narayana Param Jnanam
Narayana Param Jnanam
Narayana Paragatihi
Narayana Paragatihi Narayana Paro Yogo
Param tapaha
Narayana Param Tapaha
Narayana param jnanam
Narayana Param Jnanam
Narayana paragati
Narayana Paragatihi
Narayana Paro Yogo
Narayana Paro Yogo
Narayana Param Tapa
Narayana Param Tapa
Narayana Param Jnanam
Narayana Param Jnanam
Narayana Paragatihi
Narayana Paragatihi
Narayana paro yogo
Narayana Paro Yogo
Narayana param tapaha
Narayana Param Tapaha
Narayana param jnanam
Narayana Param Jnanam
Narayana paragatihi
Narayana Paragatihi
Narayana Paro Yogo.
Narayana Paro Yogo.
Narayana Param Tapaha.
Narayana Param Tapaha.
Narayana Param Jnanam.
Narayana Param Jnanam.
Narayana Paragatihi.
Narayana Param Gatihi.
Narayana Paro Yogo.
Ina Paro Dhammo.
Narayana Param Tapaha.
Narayana Param Tapaha.
Narayana Param Jnanam.
Narayana Param Jnanam.
Narayana Paragatihi.
Narayana Paragatihi. Narayana Paraha. Just to know Narayana. Yogaha. Concentration of mind. Narayana Param. Just with an aim to achieve Narayana. Tapaha. Austerity. Narayana. Param. Just to realize a glimpse of Narayana. Jnanam. Culture of transcendental knowledge. Narayana Para. The path of salvation ends by entering the kingdom of Narayana. Gatihi. Progressive path. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All different types of meditation or mysticism are means for realizing Narayana. All austerities are aimed at achieving Narayana. Culture of transcendental knowledge is for getting a glimpse of Narayana, and ultimately salvation is entering the kingdom of Narayana. Purport. In meditation, there are two systems of yoga, namely Ashtanga Yoga and Sankhya Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga is practice in concentrating the mind, releasing oneself from all engagements by the regulative processes of meditation, concentration, sitting postures, blocking the movements of the internal circulation of air, etc. Sankhya Yoga is meant to distinguish the truth from ephemerals. But ultimately, both these systems are meant for realizing the impersonal Brahman, which is but a partial representation of Narayana, the personality of Godhead. As we have explained before, the impersonal Brahman effulgence is only a part of the personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman is situated on the person of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As such, Brahman is the glorification of the personality of Godhead. This is confirmed both in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Matsya Purana. Gati refers to the ultimate destination, and the last word in liberation. Oneness with the impersonal Brahmajyoti is not ultimate liberation. Superior to that is the sublime association of the personality of Godhead in one of the innumerable spiritual planets in the Vaikuntha sky. Therefore, the conclusion is that Narayana, or the personality of Godhead, is the ultimate destination for all kinds of yoga systems as well as all kinds of liberation. Om Ajnana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jigatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So all different types of meditation or mysticism are means for realizing Narayana. All austerities are aimed at achieving Narayana. Culture of transcendental knowledge is for getting a glimpse of Narayana, and ultimately salvation is entering the kingdom of Narayana. So to know God in his personal form is higher than just knowing his impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence. There's a verse in the Ishopanishad where the devotee is praying to the Lord to please remove your glaring effulgence so that your pure devotee can see your real face, your true face. Because in this verse, we can understand that the Lord's effulgence or the impersonal Brahmajyoti is simply the glimmering form of the Lord. So one wants to see past that and actually see the Lord in person, see the face of the Lord. And this example is often given that one may see a green mountain from a distance and they just think it's a large green object. But if they get closer, they can see that there's varieties there. There's different kinds of life, trees and things like this. And then they get even closer and they see that there's living entities there. There's people, animals, and all sorts of things. So like this, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is realized in three different stages: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So the first stage is this Brahman effulgence. It's like seeing the green mountain from a distance. They just see there's some sort of shape there. So mystic yogis and people performing these different practices, they want to try to merge into that Brahman effulgence because of frustration in this material world. One can realize, okay, personal relationships, there's a lot of hard work there and I get frustrated. So let me not have any more of those. And being in this material life causes so many anxieties. So I'd rather just stop doing any activities. And then out of this frustration, one gets this desire for just merging. But we're living entities, so we always have desires. One might think, I want to end all desires and just merge and just be in the light like this. But that's a temporary position because the living entity always has desires. So even when going up to this high platform and merging into the impersonal Brahman effulgence, one will come back down to perform all sorts of philanthropic activities and things like this. So we understand that temporary position isn't worth it because there's no real satisfaction. That comes from a personal relationship. One should want to actually know the Supreme Lord in person. And then there can actually be happiness because there's a loving reciprocation. Just like on one morning walk, Prabhupada was giving this example that when there's happiness, when there's two living entities, he was saying or more than one, he was saying if I was just taking this walk alone, there's no ananda, there's no bliss. But because you're all with me, then there is ananda. So like that, if one just wants to merge and be devoid of any sort of personal relationship, then they won't feel satisfied. But if they have this personal connection with the Lord, then they'll actually feel ananda or bliss. So all activities should be used for actually knowing that person, the Supreme Lord Narayana, as we read several times in the verse. And this is explained often throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. Many of the verses, the really prominent verses in the first canto are given in this book, Dharma, the Way of Transcendence. And so there's a few in the beginning that really touch on this point, such as Savai Pum Samparo Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Adhoksaje Ahaitukiya Pratyata Yayatma Suprasidati, which is the supreme occupation for all humanity, is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So this is the supreme goal and the supreme activity for any human being, is that activity which is leading one to loving devotional service unto the Lord. So any other kind of practice or activity is falling short of this, if it's not leading to the loving service of the Lord, then it's more or less a waste of time. Actually, yeah, that is specifically described in one of the next verses. Dharma svanushtita pumsam vishvakshena kata suyaha notpadayed yadi ratim shama eva hi kevalam. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. So we can see there's so many different occupations, different activities, duties, and things people may do in the world. But if they're not leading to the loving service of the Lord, then they're just a waste of time. So this is also what we want to share with people, is that your real activity, your real success, your and the highest welfare for you or anyone else is devotional service. Yes, Maharaj.
The Western philosophers, some of them have speculated nicely about some of the qualities of God. They're certainly personal, but they have come to this idea because of all the beautiful things there are in this world, in nature. And so they give glory and credit to God, but still they don't consider God a person. And the problem is, without a spiritual master in the lines of succession, one won't be able to understand how a person could have all space, for example, under his control, how space could be limited. If we see the sky and we imagine it's just unlimited, there's no stop. Even if you had a wall, after the wall, there'd be more space. That's how we think. And we can't imagine how a person could be so large that he could create oceans and so many things. So we're limited. Without the spiritual master's help, who's connected with the personality of Godhead, then no amount of speculation will ever bring him to the point of serving Krishna, surrendering to Krishna. But one can very easily come to that conclusion by hearing from God himself. If God is all knowing and all pervasive and has all these qualities, why can't he reveal himself? Why can't he speak? Even an ordinary person can speak. A child, after a few years, he can speak. So we would think God, by this time, should be able to speak. And he is able to speak, and he speaks Bhagavad Gita, because he knows that people of this material world are not very patient to hear long talks. So he makes a short little talk, summarizes everything, all the philosophy in Bhagavad Gita. And if they hear, immediately they know he's a person. He doesn't hide it. It's not like he's trying to fool his readers or his students and trick them and make them think that he's impersonal when actually he's personal. No, he's very clear. He's saying, he uses so many personal pronouns, me, I. And he says, I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. And he's speaking to Arjuna, so it's not like it was just a voice coming from Akash, from the space or something. Then you could put together a theory that God is impersonal because we heard this voice, heard some sound, but he's speaking directly to Krishna. It's not difficult. Everyone saw there. The Kurus on the other side, they saw Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Arjuna saw. Sanjaya saw by the grace of the ass. Even Dhritarashtra saw through the eyes of Sanjaya. So it's a shame that these people could go so far by their speculation. They can imagine many things about God by their meditation, but without a touch of bhakti, devotional service. Then Vedeshu Durlabham Durlabham Bhakto. Even through the Vedas, which is a shortcut to the speculation process. But even that way, it will take millions and millions of years to approach Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto. But when there's bhakti, it becomes very easy. Through bhakti, a little bhakti even, one gets the mercy. Sadalesha, in this verse, how a little mercy of the Lord gives so much benefit, then he can understand. Only by devotional service, Krishna says, can I be understood. No other way. Not by studying the Vedas, not by performing austerities, not by giving in charity, only by devotional service. That means surrendering. So they're proud, they write many books and they have many followers, but they're still without a clue, still don't know about the Supreme Person. And actually, they don't want to know. We hear so many of these Western philosophers. They were living in the 1800s, some of them. India was there. It's not that India wasn't known. It was known for being a wonderful place of philosophy and religion, yoga. They could have gone, and if they were genuinely seeking to find the ultimate truth, they would have found Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Kishore Babaji or Jagannath Das Babaji, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. They would have found finally Vrindavan. They would ask, and someone would say, God is a person. Person? How can he be a person? Yes, the person would tell them, go to Vrindavan, you'll find all about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God. They'd go to Vrindavan and they'd ask around, and the people would ultimately lead them to, oh, you need to talk with Baladev Vidyabhushan. He can put you on the right track. So many great personalities there. So they could have found them if they had really taken the trouble and the humility to go there. Because generally they want people to believe that they're the supreme. If there's a God above them, then what do I need to hear from what do I need to hear his opinion for? His opinion like fades into the light, just like the glowworms in the daytime. At night, they're a little bit interesting to look at. In the daytime, who goes to look at a glowworm? Who cares about the glowworms? When the sun comes out. So if God is revealed himself, who's going to care about this philosopher here? The book he wrote about his thoughts. The thought of them not being in the center of everything is too difficult for them to bear. So they cut short their search, and they just prefer to go on speculating.
On the point of the glowworms, when the sun comes out, before coming to the Krishna consciousness movement, I was very interested in this person who claimed to have many answers. And it was an artist, and he'd make these paintings that are very intricate and have all sorts of spiritual ideas and symbols and things. And then he would write many books with some sort of spiritual philosophy that all ties into his artwork. And I bought many of them. And I thought they would have many answers. But after maybe just a couple weeks in the Bhakta program and reading Prabhupada's books, I had one of these art philosophy books still, and I just ripped it in half and threw it in the garbage. Because he seemed very interesting before that, like the most interesting thing that I could find. But again, it was just like I was in the nighttime seeing a glowworm. Once I got Srila Prabhupada's books and saw the real thing, here's Krishna, here's how we should learn about Krishna, how we should hear from him, how we should hear about him also. Then I realized, okay, this little glowworm book, not only is it not so interesting, but it might also have some misconceptions and things unhelpful. Just threw it in the trash. So, so we want to hear from Krishna and hear about Krishna from the proper source. So we can know if we're hearing something and there's no Krishna in it, then it might not be the most helpful source for us. Also, if we're presenting something, that we should, just like Maharaj said, Krishna is not hiding that he's a person, so we shouldn't try to hide that either. We should present Krishna as he is. And Brahma, in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, asks the Supreme Lord, how is it that you assume a form in your creation, but at the same time, you don't have any material form? How does this happen? And Prabhupada gives the example of a spider. It's able to make a whole web from its own energy, move around within the web and destroy the web, all from its own will and energy. So he's saying, if a spider can do that, then why would the Supreme Lord not be able to do something like that on it? Also, he can, by his own energy, he makes the whole creation, he can annihilate the whole creation, and he can move around within the whole creation by his own will, in his original spiritual form. There were just a couple other verses that I thought were really helpful in here that are more on this point of devotional service to the Lord being the supreme goal. Dharmasya hyapavargasya nartortayopakapate nartasya dharmaikantasya kamola bayahi smrtaha. All occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. So the goal should be for ultimate liberation. And again, as we saw in the purport, that ultimate liberation isn't an impersonal merging, but to actually serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not just to engage any sort of gains in sense gratification, which is all that is advertised in society today as the highest goal in life, simply to satisfy the senses somehow or other. But we can see this is the only place where we're hearing what the real goal is. It's just in Srila Prabhupada's books and from Bhagavad Gita being given as it is by Srila Prabhupada that we're hearing that the real goal is to serve Krishna, not to just serve the senses, which are never satisfied. And then there's one more verse after that that explains life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. So I heard Mahotsaha Prabhu about a year ago distributing a book to somebody. And this guy was saying, there were a few devotees talking to him, asking him, well, why don't you just, like become a monk? Like, what are you doing? He said, well, I've got, these different responsibilities, and I've got this dog and this job. And Mahotsa was explaining to him that the goal of life isn't to pick up your dog's poop when you're walking your dog. And the goal of life also isn't just to work for your boss who pays you $7 an hour or something like this. What I specifically remember him saying was the goal of life isn't to pick up your dog's poop, and it's not to work for your boss, but it's to know who you are, who is God, what is your relationship with God, and how to go back to the spiritual world. So we can see all these activities that are being done in the material world are simply for sense gratification, and they're not giving anyone satisfaction. But if one gets one of these books from Srila Prabhupada, then they can know that the real goal of any activity is to render service unto the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, any activity someone's doing, any cultivation of knowledge, any helping, so-called helping others, or whatever it is all a waste of time if the result of it isn't pure devotional service to the Lord. Then it's just a useless labor. All they're getting is that labor and that working, but they're not getting anything real and of value. So everything should be used to attain the devotional service of the Lord. Are there any comments or questions on this? Yes, Krishna Shravana Prabhu.
It's only the start of it, Maharaj, that one cannot know Krishna just by giving charity. But if somebody gives charity to persons who know Krishna, go and know Krishna that way?
That's beneficial, because if one donates to a brahmana, they receive many, many more times back what they donated. But if they donate to a Vaishnava, a devotee of the Lord, they receive unlimited back, and it helps them towards the supreme goal of life. Just like when we distribute books, we're asking, can you give a donation for this book? And it's not because we are in great need of their donation, but because if they actually, although it is a very nice book, it's not that it just grew on a tree, so it's pretty reasonable to ask someone to at least cover the cost of it. But if they give something for Krishna's service, then their spiritual life has begun, their path back to Godhead. When someone engages in the Lord's service, there's no loss or diminution, and that engagement is kept. So they use a little bit of the fruits of their labor, their money, in the Lord's service today, and then eventually they'll be engaging in the Lord's service again in the future, because they've just begun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes.
Hare Krishna. I had a question on what Maharaj was talking about, the impersonalism. So I was reading in second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that when Brahma was born from the lotus flower, he was bewildered because he couldn't find anyone around. He was all by himself. And all he could see was the lotus flower. So he decided to find the source of the lotus flower. And at this time, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, he was hidden from Brahma's sight. So I guess, and Brahma heard the words tapasya or tapa come from the sky, and he took that as an instruction from God. So one could say that this is impersonalism. this is what's it called? How do we know that this isn't an impersonal God speaking to us from the sky? That God is actually a person, and instead of some impersonal aspect of God.
Well, if we read a little bit further from after he hears the words tapa, we can see a very personal interaction. And here it is. And seeing Brahma present before him, the Lord accepted him as worthy to create living beings, to be controlled as he desired. And thus, being much satisfied with him, the Lord shook hands with Brahma, and slightly smiling, addressed him thus. So the Lord comes and personally shakes hands with Brahma, and here's just a little bit from the purport. Brahma also does his duty very perfectly, not only by generating the living entities, but also by spreading his party for reclaiming the fallen souls. The party is called the Brahma Sampradaya, and any member of this party to date is naturally engaged in reclaiming the fallen souls back to Godhead, back home. The Lord is very much anxious to get back his parts and parcels, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. No one is more dear than the one who takes the task of reclaiming the fallen souls back to Godhead. There are many renegades from the Brahma Sampradaya whose only business is to make men more forgetful of the Lord, and thus entangle them more and more in material existence. Such persons are never dear to the Lord, and the Lord sends them deeper into the darkest region of matter, so that such envious demons may not be able to know the Supreme Lord. Anyone, however, preaching the mission of the Lord in the line of the Brahma Sampradaya is always dear to the Lord, and the Lord, being satisfied with such a preacher of the authorized bhakti cult, shakes hands with him in great satisfaction. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.